Hey YouTube, hope we're all having a fantastic day. Today we're going to be explaining and ranking every single family member perk in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game. Before we dive in, just a few super quick notes. Firstly, this tier list is my own personal opinion, but I would love to hear your thoughts down below, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, and I always love keeping the dialogue open. Secondly, making this tier list was quite difficult in terms of where I wanted to rank perks due to the fact that all the family members are wildly different in terms of abilities, playstyles, attributes, and some perks can be a lot more effective on some family members and way less effective on others. So kind of bear with me on that, but I think in general we got some pretty good placement. Some family members don't have access to certain perks, so I'll be letting you know which perks work with which family members in this video as well. The perks will all be in alphabetical order in case there's one you're looking for, and we're also going to rank each perk at level 3 respectively. These videos take a lot of time to make, so if you do enjoy what you see today, feel free to drop a like or subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. I also live stream on Twitch, so feel free to come swing by and say hello. And lastly, we also did a victim perk tier list video just a few weeks back, so if you'd like to see that, there is a card on screen and a link in the description. But let's get ready to make this tier list happen. The first perk that we have on our list today is Activated, and this is available on all family members. After being stunned, you deal 20% extra damage for 40 seconds. So we are going to go ahead, we're going to put this in the bottom of the A tier to start out, maybe high B later in the video. But point being, this perk is actually pretty effective. The damage buff, the 20% extra, is actually pretty sizable. Not to mention the window of 40 seconds gives you a lot of time to follow up. One of the big downsides to this perk though is the fact that you do have to get stunned, so a victim will have to go out of their way and do that to you. But if this ends up happening, this is actually a pretty solid choice, especially in terms of a savagery perk. After that, we have the perk Battering Ram. This is available on the Cook and Hitchhiker. When barging a door, each consecutive hit is stronger by 80%. So we are going to be placing this in the top of the C tier category. I actually do think this is quite a good perk. The problem being it is just a little too situational. So if you do end up going against some victims who are using latches, trying to escape, slip away, that sort of thing, this perk can be really effective at keeping you going and keeping you in proximity of the victims. The problem being most of the time you're not going to be encountering a lot of latch doors, especially in the upstairs area where Cook and Hitchhiker are oftentimes hanging out. You know, all in all, it's a good perk, but just a little too situational. After that, we have the perk Big Swings, and this is available on all family members. Attack damage is increased by 15%, but stamina consumption tied to attacks is 200% more costly. So we are going to go ahead, we are going to put this in the B tier for the time being. This perk is very, very dependent on which family member you're playing and how your attributes are balanced. In the right hands, this perk is actually pretty strong. I think of someone like Leatherface with loads of endurance, where this perk doesn't have quite as a negative effect on him. But if you're playing someone like the Cook, you're going to feel this quite a bit. So I think if you are able to balance this perk out well with the attributes that you have or the family member that you're playing, it is really quite effective. But on the flip side, if you just throw this on haphazardly and your attributes aren't balanced correctly for running this perk, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. But overall, I think the damage buff is pretty nice. So I think it kind of puts it right in that B tier. After that, we have the perk Blood Banker. This is available on all family members. Your maximum blood storage capacity is increased by 30%. So we're going to go ahead, we are going to place this in the B tier just above Big Swings for the time being. The big thing with this is blood storage is always a really important thing, especially in terms of getting Grandpa fed and leveled up, which is wildly important in most of your matches. Additionally, it's a very consistent perk. You know what value you're going to get out of it, and I think blood harvesting is very important in Texas Chainsaw as well. Of course, this can be replaced by things such as rebalancing some attributes, and it also depends on which family member you're playing for this. But overall, I think it's a pretty solid perk. After that, we have the perk Bloodlust, which is a Leatherface unique perk, meaning it just pertains to only Leatherface and his ability. With this, Leatherface does 30% more damage after executing a victim at the gallows. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put this perk at the F tier for the time being, maybe bottom of D. The problem with this is it is far too situational. Most matches, you are not going to be executing a victim at the gallows. It really just does not happen all that often. The buff is super sizable and really nice, but truly, most matches, you're just not going to get any value out of this. So on the whole, really nothing to write home about with this perk, and most of your games, you're never going to get any usage out of this. After that, we have the perk Blood Runner, and this is available on all family members. Stamina consumption is reduced by 15% when carrying a blood vial that is more than 50% full. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna place this in the B tier. Overall, this perk is pretty straightforward, simple. The buffs aren't anything crazy, but it does encourage gathering blood either from buckets or victims, which is always a good thing. And additionally, it's gonna help you to transport that blood more quickly back to Grandpa when you do have a vial that is kind of worth feeding to Grandpa. So on the whole, I think blood harvesting perks are typically pretty good, and they encourage efficient playstyles as well. So I like this one quite a bit, and I think it sits nicely in that B tier. Next up, we have Bringing Home the Bacon, which is a Leatherface unique perk. Carrying a victim highlights Leatherface to all family members for 30 seconds. So we're gonna go ahead, we are gonna put this one in the F category. On the whole, there is no reason you need to know this information. Additionally, the family can always spot each other using the family R reading ability, and the buff just doesn't make a lot of logical sense. So in all honesty, I think it belongs pretty low down in that F tier. But yeah, that's kind of what I think. After that, we have the perk Chicken Whisperer, and this is available on all family members. Chickens will not generate noise if you are spotted, and this does not affect victims. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put this in the D tier category. Most of the time, victims aren't gonna notice a family member has entered an area due to a chicken. And you could get a sneaky play with this every once in a while, like if you were waiting on top of a ladder for a victim to come up and you didn't want a chicken like screaming its head off. But on the whole, it's really not that effective, and you'd get value out of it every once in a while. So I think it fits nicely in the D tier category there. After that, we have the perk Confusing Mechanic. This is available on all family members. After turning on a generator, it takes 15 seconds longer than usual for victims to disable it. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put this in the F tier category. This perk is pretty useless considering that generators now start on. You could get some use out of it here and there, like preventing a secondary escape, or if you really wanted to increase the time of your the start of your match by turning the generator off and then back on. But on the whole, it's kind of going out of your way for not that much value, and additionally, it doesn't work on car batteries, so I think it kind of belongs down here in the F tier. After that, we have the perk 2 Cycle Charge, and this is a Leatherface unique perk. While revving your chainsaw, you generate stamina 60% faster. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put this in the B tier. These ones are always hard to rank due to the fact that it is only available on Leatherface. So it's kind of hard to say, but this is by far much better than his other abilities, and stamina can be kind of the name of the game when it comes to playing Leatherface in terms of putting long-term pressure on victims, especially if you have a longer style of chase somewhere in the basement. And Leatherface does have insane amounts of stamina, so this can kind of just give you a little bit of an edge and a little bit of a buff. So on the whole, I think it's pretty kind of middle of the road, unique perk for Leatherface, so I think it fits nicely in the B tier. After that, we have the perk Dinner Bell. This is available on all family members. Victims caught in traps will be highlighted, and your maximum stamina is increased by 60 points for 15 seconds. So I'm having a hard time knowing where to put this one, but I think I'm going to put it at the bottom of the B tier, given you have a solid hitchhiker player on your team. The big deal with this one is, you know, you're never guaranteed to get value, right? Especially with very observant, very good victim players. They might do a really nice job just avoiding traps completely, negating them, so you won't ever get value out of this. But when you do get value out of this, the information and the buff is really, really, really nice. It can help out the family quite a bit. So I don't know. I could see this being lower, depending on the amount of skill that a player has, or higher. So I don't know. That's kind of where I want to put it for now, though. After that, we have the perk Down the Rabbit Hole, and this is available on all family members. Victims who climb down wells will be highlighted for 17 seconds. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put this in the S tier category. I think this is a ridiculously strong perk. It really helps out Leatherface quite a bit, especially if he's spending some extra time in the basement. Additionally, when victims are returning to the basement through wells, it's when they're kind of in shambles. It's when they're being chased by family members, or they've been found and they need to return to the basement to get some extra health or tools or bone scrap. So this can apply a lot of pressure. This does get worse with map knowledge. So if you know how a well on the surface connects to the landing location in the basement, the perk does become a little bit less useful. But because you're gonna get 17 seconds out of this, it's going to be quite valuable. So on the whole, I think it belongs in the S tier category. I think it really earns its spot, and it can also have some super nice synergy with abilities such as well. So yeah, on the whole, I think it definitely earns its spot up here. After that, we have the perk Dracula. This is available on Cook, Hitchhiker, Johnny, and Sissy. Winning a close encounter gives you 70% more blood, while losing a close encounter gives you 40 blood. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put this in the lower B tier category. So I actually kind of like this perk because no matter what side of the coin you end up on, if you win or lose, you're going to get something out of it, which I think is really neat and nice. The only reason I'm putting it a little bit lower is because you have to have in close encounter. And as a family member, you can't start in close encounter, right? A victim has to kind of make that decision for you. So that's kind of why I put that one there. Overall, you do get good value if you do end up in a close encounter. But if you never do, you're never going to get value out of the perk. So I think it kind of just belongs in the B tier there. After that, we have the perk Easily Tuckered Out. This is available on Hitchhiker, Johnny, and Sissy. Your attacks use 50% less stamina, but the stamina regeneration rate is 40% slower. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put this in the C tier. I do have mixed feelings on this one because it really depends on how a victim plays. If a victim is bad at routing, bad at making distance, this perk is actually pretty nice because you're going to be able to rattle off a ton of hits without exhausting all of your stamina, and it's going to be a lot more effective that way. But on the flip side, if you're going against victims who are really good at routing, making distance, you're going to be losing your chases due to the fact that you're going to have a hard time regenerating your stamina. Being able to make a lot of hits isn't going to matter because your victims are going to be able to, just take off, and you're going to have worse stamina economy basically on the whole. So I don't know. I think it kind of belongs in the C tier there, and it's really dependent on how your attributes are balanced and how victims are playing. Next up, we have Efficient Herbalist, and this is a Sissy unique perk. Poisoning an object has a 75% chance not to consume any powder. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put this in the B tier here. I actually like this perk quite a bit. It keeps Sissy's effectiveness up, and it really negates the amount of times you're going to have to stop at a table to regenerate your power. So on the whole, I really like it. You're going to be able to poison more objects and also have more poison on hand when you do encounter a victim. So on the whole, I really like that. The only thing that's bringing this perk down is the probability, right? So there's always some element of chance that you're not going to get value out of this perk. And of course, the 75% is pretty safe, but on the whole, I think it fits nicely in the middle of the B tier there. After that, we have the perk Feral, and this is available on all family members. Your savagery is increased by 7. So we're gonna go ahead and put this in the C tier. Any of you that know me know a lot of the times for perks that just give you attribute points, I think they really do sit exactly in the middle. The reason being, a lot of the times it can be much better to just bring perks that are more catered to your build. But it can be nice, especially if you're not far along in your skill tree, to bring up some of your attributes or round out your attributes on particular family members. So I don't know. I have mixed feelings on these. I always think they kind of go just smack in the middle. So we'll be putting it in the C tier for now. After that, we have the perk Fired Up, and this is available on all family members. After running out of stamina, there is a 90% less delay before stamina starts regenerating again. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put this in the bottom of the A tier. I may be overestimating this perk's value just a little bit, but I think when it comes to chasing victims, stamina is absolutely the name of the game, right? So being able to close the window on that, regeneration period is super nice. And I think it just helps you keep pace with victims more often, and on the whole can help you win a few more of your chases. So I think it belongs nicely in the bottom of the A tier, maybe top of B tier, but let me know. Next up on the list is Hurt Pride, and this is available on all family members. After recovering from being stunned, your stamina recharges 80% faster for 15 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put this in the D tier for the time being. So the buff is actually pretty awesome, I will say. I really like that 80%, and I think it adds a lot of value to the perk. The problem is the time window is just really short. 15 seconds isn't all that long. So a lot of the times, I don't think you're going to get the full value out of this perk because you're not going to exhaust yourself enough to do so. So I think it kind of belongs in the top of the D tier there, personally. After that, we have the perk Hysterical Strength, and this is available on all family members. When below 15% stamina, you deal 20% more damage. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put this in the low B tier. I think this is an excellent perk. for if you end up in a situation where your victim is slipping away, you need a little extra boost of damage for your last hit or so, when you're, below that 15% stamina threshold. And it's a nice little buff. The problem being, sometimes, you'll exhaust yourself completely, victims will slip away, things of that nature. So, it can have varied value, and it also depends on the family member that you're playing and the amount of endurance that you have. So I think this can be quite good on, someone like Cook, where he doesn't have very much endurance, and sometimes that last swing really does matter before a victim just gets to a crawl space, a well, something of that nature. So I think it fits nicely in the bottom of the B tier. After that, we have the perk Insulated, and this is available on Cook and Johnny. Booby-trapped lamps do not stun you. So this perk absolutely earns its spot in the bottom of the F tier. It is pretty much useless. Most victims aren't going to be tampering with lights whatsoever, and you're probably not going to be turning on and off lights a ton throughout your match. So I think it really just belongs down there in the F tier. Not really a whole lot of reason to run this one. After that, we have the perk I Smell Blood, and this is available on Cook, Hitchhiker, and Johnny. Your proximity range is increased by 3 times to help you stay focused on the last victim. We're going to go ahead. We're going to put this at the top of the F tier category. For those of you who don't know, this is just referring to that yellow proximity range. And this only activates when the last victim is alive. So at best, it's a bit of a visual aid, maybe a buff sort of a thing. But on the whole, it's really not that valuable. And it's very, very, very situational that you are going to get value out of this. So I don't know. I think it kind of earns its spot in the F tier. I could see this being useful every once in a blue moon, but on the whole, not super great. Next up, we have Linger, and this is a Sissy unique perk. Your toxic cloud lasts 15 seconds longer and is 300 centimeters larger in diameter. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put this in the middle of the B tier for the time being. The fact that you are gonna get consistent value out of this, meaning you're gonna get 15 seconds, longer of duration, and your cloud is going to be bigger, is always a good thing, right? And it can be useful for things such as cutting off potential victim routes, or even just trying to latch onto a victim with some of your poison cloud. I think the thing that really sets it just in the middle B is you can combine it with other perks, such as Special Blend, and I think that bumps it up just a little bit more. So on the whole, I don't know, I think it's pretty average perk. After that, we have Master Key, and this is a Leatherface unique perk. You can instantly burst through a latched door 5 times. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put this towards the top of the B tier here. I think this perk is actually pretty useful considering it is a Leatherface unique ability. A lot of the times when you're chasing victims in the basement at the start of the match, latches are one of their tools that they have at their disposal in order to cut you off, in order to make distance, stall your time. So this can actually be pretty useful specifically for Leatherface. And I think out of the Leatherface abilities, this one's pretty nice. So I think it kind of earns its spot just in the middle to top of B tier there, and overall it's pretty solid. After that, we have Pack Animal, and this is available on all family members. After being hit with a sneak attack, the attacking victim is highlighted for 9 seconds. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna put this in the bottom of the C tier. The info you get from it is nice. The problem being is this is a little bit negated with communication, especially if you're able to, communicate to your teammates that you've just had a sneak attack performed on you. Everyone can check where you are with the R reading ability. Bada bing, bada boom. But I do think it comes up in solo queue, and also, info is never a bad thing in Texas Chainsaw. So I think it kind of sits nicely in the bottom of C tier there. Additionally, the only other thing that's pulling it down is the fact that you do have to have a sneak attack performed on you. But it's a nice little buff if that does happen. So I think it kind of earns its spot just at the bottom of the C tier. So next up, we have the perk Patience, and this is a Johnny unique perk. Standing still will reduce your ability consumption rate by 40%. So we're gonna go ahead and put this at the bottom of the D tier. It is unfortunate that this is Johnny's only unique perk. So though the buff on this is nice, it's the ability drain really isn't too harsh at all to begin with. And secondly, if you're standing still, you've probably gathered the information that you already need. So I don't know, I just don't see a lot of utility to this perk, and I think it kind of fits nicely in the bottom of the D tier there. Next up, we have the perk Prey Drive, and this is a Cook unique perk. Spotting a victim increases stamina recharge by 40% for 15 seconds. So this one is a bit odd, and I really do have a hard time placing it. I think I'm going to put it at the bottom of the B tier. I could absolutely see it at the top of the C tier. The reason I think this one actually has quite good value is if it's used correctly. So like, let's say you're in an active chase with a victim. You can use this to stop when you're low on stamina, tell the rest of the family where the victim is located, and then get this 40% recharge for 15 seconds, which is really, really, really nice. And given the fact that Cook has pretty low endurance to begin with, I think this is kind of a nice ability. Not to mention there's no cooldown mentioned either. So I think on the whole, it earns its spot kind of in the very bottom of B, maybe top of C. It is a little bit situational, which I think kind of just brings it down. But overall, I think you can get some good value out of this. Next up, we have the perk Punishment, and this is available on Leatherface, Cook, Johnny, and Sissy. After finding a victim in a hiding spot, 50 extra points of damage will be dealt. So this one is quite difficult to place, I won't lie. I think I'm going to put it in the bottom of the C tier, maybe the top of the D tier. So this one, the reason it's so difficult is 50 extra points of damage is really, really effective. Most victims have somewhere in the ballpark of 110 HP. So this will slaughter victims that you find. Absolutely. The problem with this is that you are almost never going to find victims hiding. So I'm going to put it in the bottom of C tier. I think it's just such a toss up. But truly, you're hardly ever going to find victims hiding. So I think I maybe might even move it down to the D tier when we finish up. But on the whole, yeah, I think we'll put it bottom of C for now. And it's a gamble for sure. After that, we have the perk Rage, and this is available on Cook and Johnny. Successfully hitting a victim will fill your ability bar by 15%. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to put this in the D tier category. This perk doesn't seem extremely logical to me. Most of the time as Cook or Johnny, once you have hit a victim, you don't really need your ability. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And I think there's a lot of other perks that you can bring that will just bring way more value. So we'll be putting it in the D tier category for now. Next up, we have Rough Cut, which is a Leatherface unique perk. Hitting a victim with the chainsaw causes 1 HP of extra damage per 7 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put this towards the bottom of the C tier category. So the buff is, it's nothing great, but I'm always a big fan of extra damage. I think it's a nice thing. The problem with this specifically being for Leatherface is most of the time you're going to be going for those really big hits, right? The nice one big hit on a super hot chainsaw. And the basically 7 HP extra isn't going to do all that much, and it's really not going to make that much of a difference. I could see this perk being a little bit more valuable if you go for a different kind of playstyle with Leatherface where you're doing more small hits, but victims have a much greater chance of getting away then. So I don't know. On the whole, I don't think it's that great. I think it can have some nice value over the duration of an entire match, but I think it sits kind of nicely in the bottom of C tier. After that, we have the perk Rubber Boots. This is available on Leatherface and Hitchhiker. You're immune to electrified cattle grids, and the generator starts with only 1 pull. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to be placing this in the F tier category. This is definitely by far one of the most useless perks in Texas Chainsaw. You're almost never going to be running over electrified cattle grids. There's kind of no reason for it. And secondly, the generator starts on now, so the 1 pull is pretty irrelevant. So I think it's really pretty nice in the bottom of the F tier there. After that, we have Rubber Legs, which is a Sissy unique perk. Your Toxic Cloud and poisoned items also slow victims down by 20%. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this in the middle of the A tier here. Anything that hinders survivor movement is pretty awesome. This is really going to help yourself and other family members be able to close in on a victim more quickly, have them make less distance, and really pull off an execution. Of course, this is a better perk with better Sissy players due to the fact that they'll probably know when and how to use their clouds. But on the whole, I think it deserves its spot in A. After that, we have the perk Scout, and this is available on all family members. Your movement speed is increased by 15%, but melee damage is reduced by 10%. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put this in the B tier category for now. I actually think this perk can bring some pretty cool value. The increased speed is pretty nice. And you can always make up the lost damage in your attributes as well. So I think on the whole, this can actually be pretty effective. Of course, it depends on which family member you're playing and which attributes you rebalance. I think that's very important if you're going to use a perk like this, because it can end up hurting you quite a bit too. So on the whole, though, I think it's pretty solid, and it can make a nice choice. Right after that, we have security pins, and this is a Cook unique perk. Added locks are 50% harder to unlock for victims. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the S tier category. I think this absolutely earns its spot up here. 50% is pretty nuts. And on top of it's already a hard obstacle for victims. Of course, this can be countered by Connie, but it is just this extra layer of, you know, buying yourself time in Texas Chainsaw, which that is the name of the game. If you can buy yourself more time as a family, you have a much greater chance of executing all the victims. So I think it's really great in that way. Not to mention, you can pair this with, you know, abilities like No One Escapes Hell, and it is just awesome. So truly, I do think this belongs in the S tier, and I think this is single-handedly one of the best perks you can bring in Texas Chainsaw. After that, we have the perk Serrated, and this is available on Cook, Hitchhiker, Johnny, and Sissy. Victims hit by the perk holder take 1 HP per second of extra damage for the next 5 seconds. I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the C tier for now. This has pretty minimal impact on your match overall. It can be a nice buff here and there, and overall get you some you know, extra health taken from victims throughout the duration of your match, but on the whole, it's really not going to change all that much, and it's really not going to like make or break your match. So I don't know, there's some situations where I could see this being more valuable than others, but in a typical game and on the whole, I think it belongs in the C tier. After that, we have the perk Siphon, and this is available on all family members. Your blood harvesting is increased by 7. So this is just another attribute rebalancing perk. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this in the C tier. I think blood harvesting can be a bit more important than savagery, but it really depends on which family member you're playing, what attributes you have, what attributes your other family members have, what the team needs. So, you know, all in all, I think it sits nice in the middle C tier. Of course, I think it's better to just run other blood related perks, but if you need a little boost in your blood harvesting category, and it's effective for maybe the build you're using, I think it can be an okay choice. So again, kind of middle of the C tier. After that, we have Slow and Steady. This is available on Leatherface, Hitchhiker, Johnny, and Sissy. While sprinting, stamina usage is decreased by 50%, but overall speed is reduced by 10%. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this perk at the top of the C tier category for the time being. The big thing with this one is it kind of depends on which map you're on and which family member you're playing and what playstyle you're going for. You know, like I think if you're running laps and making a ton of distance throughout the entire duration of the match, this can be kind of nice. Of course, you're going to be a little bit more lackluster in terms of hunting down victims. So I don't know. I think it kind of depends on the play style, and what your specific role is as a family member in a given match. So I think it fits nicely kind of at the top of C tier there, for the time being. Next up, we have Special Blend, and this is available on all family members. Walking through Sissy's Poison Clouds boosts your stamina regeneration by 50% for the next 30 seconds and gives your next attack 1 poison effect. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm also gonna be placing this in the C tier here. This one's difficult. So the buff is actually pretty nice on the whole. The problem is, number one, you have to have a Sissy in your match to make this work. And number two, you have to be running through her Poison Clouds, which isn't really always a guarantee. This can be nice if you're hunting in a pack as the family in order to execute a victim quickly. The problem with that is a lot of times you'll lose pressure in other locations on the map, and it'll make it a little bit easier for victims to escape. So I don't know. I think it's a bit situational. By no means, I don't think it's a bad perk or anything. I think it's just a little bit situational. The buff is nice. I really like the poison effect too. But, you know, on the whole, I think it kind of just sits middle of the road sort of a perk. Next up, we have Spore Loser, and this is a Sissy unique perk. Losing a close encounter automatically drops an emergency poison cloud even if you're out of powder. The cooldown is 30 seconds. So I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna put this one at the top of the C tier. I could see this also being bottom of the B tier. The hard thing with this one is you cannot guarantee close encounters, right? I always think close encounter perks are just down a notch just because of that. But dropping a poison cloud is pretty nice because it's going to let the rest of the family know where the victim is headed. It's also going to give the victim the poison debuffs. So it can be nice. And I think it just kind of fits in the top of C tier there. After that, we have the perk Surgical, and this is available on all family members. You receive 100% more blood when attacking victims. So I'm going to put this in the B tier mostly for its consistency. You know what you're going to get out of this perk, and blood is a very important thing in Texas Chainsaw. This perk can help a lot if you're struggling to get executions. It actually becomes a little bit less useful when you're doing particularly well But I think it's a nice blood related perk, does its job well, and having more blood is never a bad thing, especially when you're struggling within a match. So yeah, overall a great perk, and I think it fits nicely there. After that, we have the perk Tenderizer, and this is available on all family members. Slamming a door on a victim will deal 35 damage. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to place this one in the B tier category. On the whole, this perk is actually pretty solid. 35 health points is definitely nothing to scoff at. The problem being, you have to have victims that are going to want to play doors with you, and number two, you got to hit your doors when you do play them. You know, you got to hit your slams. So you know, I think that what's keeping this from being a perk that is higher up on the tier list is due to the fact that you cannot guarantee that victims are going to stand by doors, and that you are going to get value out of this perk. So on the whole, I think it's pretty solid, and when you do get value out of it, it's sizable, but nonetheless, I think it fits nice in the B tier. After that, we have Tracker Tag. This is available on Leatherface, Cook, Hitchhiker, and Johnny. Hitting a victim highlights them for all family members. Highlight duration is 5 seconds. So I'm going to go ahead and place this in the middle of the C tier. The big thing with this perk is it is easily replaced by communication, 100% of the way, and the 5-second duration really isn't all that long. So I don't know, I can see this perk being a little bit better, definitely in situations where you're not communicating with your family, you're in solo queue, things of that nature, but on the whole, I think it's really middle of the road. It's a nice little buff, you know, if you're looking for that, but yeah, nothing to write home about. Next up, we have the perk Universal Donor, and this is available on all family members. Blood collected from buckets is increased by 40%. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to put this at the top of the A tier. This is absolutely one of the better perks in Texas Chainsaw, due to how reliable the perk is and what the perk has to offer. It's incredibly good during the early game to gather lots of blood, feed Grandpa quickly, put that pressure on victims. It's a great counter to something like Agitator as well. And I think on the whole, it's just absolutely a fantastic perk. And always gathering blood and putting that extra level of pressure on victims is never ever a bad thing. So I think it sits really nicely in the A tier. After that, we have the perk Unrelenting. This is available on all family members. Your endurance is increased by 7. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to place this in the C tier just under Feral. It is just one of the attribute balancing perks, so I think it can have its uses, very similar to something like Feral. In my book, I think endurance can be a little bit less important compared to blood harvesting, and sometimes savagery as well. But again, it really just depends on which family member you're playing, what perks you're running, and what playstyle you're going for. So it's really hard to kind of rate those. But in terms of where the perk belongs, definitely middle of the road C tier, and that's where we'll be leaving it. After that, we have Venom, and this is a Hitchhiker unique perk. Victims caught in traps take 1 HP of extra damage per second for 30 seconds. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to place this towards the top of the B tier. This perk is pretty solid. 30 HP is pretty sizable, and you're getting extra value out of your traps even if you aren't able to act on them. So I think this is pretty cool. It applies a lot of pressure to victims as well. The only reason it kind of sits in the B and not any higher is due to the fact that you're never guaranteed to have that trap value. So I think it fits well right there. Next up, we have the perk Violent. This is available on Leatherface, Cook, Hitchhiker, and Sissy. Your damage is increased by 20% when carrying a full blood vial. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to place this towards the top of the B tier. This perk works particularly well if you have a smaller blood vial, but the damage buff is pretty nice, and it can even help you to snowball at certain points in the match. And of course, it encourages, you know, gathering blood, whether that be buckets or victims. So overall, I think it's a pretty solid perk. The only downside is it does tempt family members from keeping blood from Grandpa, which is never a good thing, but I think it does cater to a certain play style, and it can be very effective throughout the match. Next up, we have the perk Warmed Up. This is available on Cook and Johnny. After winning or losing a close encounter, you gain 40% to ability charge. So I'm going to go ahead and place this towards the bottom of the D tier. All in all, this perk really just isn't that great, doesn't offer a lot of value. And you really don't need this, you know, ability charge after a close encounter all that often. I can see some situations where this would be helpful here and there, but on the whole, I don't think it's that great of a perk, and I think it belongs down in the D tier. Next up, we have Wireframe, and this is a Hitchhiker unique perk. You can traverse gaps 40% faster and crawl spaces 60% faster. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put this in the S tier. In terms of applying pressure to victims in chase, this is about as good as it gets. You're able to follow victims very closely with this. If you're hunting with your family, this is incredibly good for applying just so much pressure to victims, and it's very movement based. So I think this is absolutely one of the better perks in Texas Chainsaw, and it can have a very large impact on the match, and how victims need to react while chasing. So I think it definitely earns its spot up here. Last but certainly not least, we have You'll Pay for That. This is available on all family members. If Grandpa is incapacitated, your damage dealt to victims is increased by 25% until he recovers. So I'm gonna go ahead. I am tempted to put this in the bottom of S, but I think we'll be putting it at the very top of A for the time being. So this perk is really great because number one, if you end up in this situation, you'll know a survivor's whereabouts. So you'll be able to effectively use the damage buff. And most of the time, there is a family member in somewhat close proximity of Grandpa almost at all times. Additionally, if you are doing well, and feeding Grandpa a lot of blood, getting him leveled up, and you know, closing that time window on victims, chances are a victim is going to want to immobilize Grandpa. So you can get some really nice value out of this perk, and it's a really great way to get some extra value out of victims who are being aggressive towards Grandpa, especially when you're doing very well with him. So that is going to be our complete perk tier list for today. I hope you all really enjoyed the video. If you did, feel free to leave a like or subscribe. It really does help me out quite a bit. But I'd love to know down below what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, because these perks can be very complicated and very map dependent, family member dependent, attribute dependent, all those things. But nonetheless, I hope you all very much enjoyed, and we will catch you in the next one. Take care.